Laugh
or else.
Welcome back to the LOERadio Show here on WNUR-FM 89.3. I'm your host, Tim Radicek, and coming up right now, we've got a review we're going to play. Well, actually, Donnie's got a review he's going to read for us of a concert. Is that what's going on, Donnie?
Yes, a concert review, but certainly from a brand new angle.
Brand new angle. All right, well, let's get to that, and I wish you would have cued me before we came back about the song you wanted to play.
Don't worry about it.
Just had a little bit of some Metallica going there, but go ahead, Donnie, take it away.
All right. How did things run completely off the rails the way they did? No real answers to that question, and that was the deep solace I took in the situation as I watched the great guru, the Reverend Mickey Barstool, charge the stage, barrel the lead singer off his feet and onto his wiry rock god frame. I laughed wildly and shoved my way through the sparse and stunned crowd while he cracked the head of the guitarist with the knobby shillelagh he carried with him, keeping the other members of the band at bay with threats of the same, and tearing off on a wild, frothing rant of damnation for the paper-thin nature and skinny jeans of the new hipster elite. I saw the whole thing coming, and knowing it would end like this still did nothing. But why stop the punchline by killing the joke midstream? The last thing I remember before leaving the house that evening was trying to get my hair looking sharp underneath the flickering of the light bulb over my mirror as it signaled its coming demise. The Reverend, already geeked on unknown sources and getting squirrely, leaned in the doorway and babbled some twisted blessing at the light bulb, praising its time of service. He started running through the ragged pages of his Bible, which was really nothing more than an IRS-approved ledger book with hand-scribbled translations of the King James Version in phrasing that only he could decipher. But when spoken, caused a deep purring in my base molecules that could only mean understanding on the deepest levels of the psychic spectrum. "You spend too much time getting yourself in gear, Donnie," he said to me, his words almost inaudible over the swishing of the whiskey bottle he was shaking up. "Vanity is the first start of the walk down the bad road, my brother, and no one's going to care what you look like when you get there anyway." "Don't worry about me," I said, dismissing his assessment while getting the part of my hair cut neat and right. Not quite satisfied, but knowing it wouldn't get better than that, I dropped the comb in the sink, took a handle of the bottle, and gave it a sniff. "What exactly did you mix in the whiskey?" swallowing a good-sized sip before I got an answer. "Ibogaine. Straight from the west coast of the Dark Continent. It's a serious mind-breaker with no sense of humor and no mercy," he assured me, blessing the bottle and our souls. "The bushmen take it when they go out into the savannah to hunt. Keeps the mind running, the vision panoramic, and the body stiff as a board." "Stiff as a board, huh?" I said. "That doesn't make any sense. If you're going hunting, why would you want to stand still? Moving your feet is part of the very essence of hunting." "Think about it," the Reverend said. "Why go out and chuck spears at a cheetah that's just going to outrun you anyway when you can stand perfectly still, not even casting a shadow, and let the thing walk right up to you, so close you can grip it, grab it, and snap its neck, miming the action with a cat conjured from thin air. All those rebel sex fighting all the time, they give it to the child soldiers out there too. Yeah, they cut it with a bit of heroin, and it gets those tykes frothing at the chops for some limb chopping." "Brother, you're peeing on the right tree," I said, tossing my jacket on, grabbing the tickets to the show, and closing the door behind us just as the filaments crumbled to dust and the light went out for the most permanent time. By the time the Ibogaine-laced Jimmy Beam seeped its way in the synapses, we had already hit about 3 bars, working our way down to the venue, sipping cold beers and getting ourselves in the right headset to take in the show we were going to see. "So who's this band you're dragging me out to see tonight?" the Reverend asked me during our pit stop behind a couple of dumpsters that did well as makeshift toilets. "Aaron Barron's in the Midnight Stroll," I said, snapping the buttons of my fly back into place and reaching behind me for the beer I was able to smuggle out of the last bar we were in. A kind of electro rock outfit. Real cool, real groovy. The walk turned into a blurring flow of rambling reasoning and thoughts of bent natures. The street signs spoke in unknown languages, but the sense of direction was unwavering, right and true. Moral compasses never break. But then suddenly, among the go-nowhere chatter and tightening grip of the African blood drug, an eerie familiarity bled over into my eyes. I saw a house that used to have a family barbecue days after pet cats went missing. A hedgerow of bushes that blossomed with red berries that were sure to poison any fools that tried to eat them. There was a spot on the curb whose missing chunk matched a scar on my left shin. These trees, these lights, and this chunk of the city grid. The Reverend, without looking at me, felt the nasty vibes of my rising unease. "What's your deal?" he asked, grabbing the bottle from my hands. "I'm thinking this stuff may be a little stiff for you, pansy." He lit 2 cigarettes and handed one to me. "Nah, man, that ain't it. I said, taking the deep pull of my smoke and stopping dead in front of an unlit but clearly meaningful house right off the alley. Brother man, this is the house I grew up in. No kidding, I didn't know that. And I don't care, he said, grabbing my shoulder and turning me over to stare at the couple in the next yard over, who were themselves sunglassed and smoking and staring at the two of us like we were low-rent, broken zoo animals. If this was your pad, then I'm guessing those two over there used to be your neighbors. And he was right, they sure were. A husband and wife called Earl and Tara. I said nothing to them, knowing it made no sense to, and unable to come to grips with this cannon shot of past realities, found my feet had set into what felt like a vat of thick, quick-drying glue. The good Reverend, always the social instigator, innately picked up that something was wrong with the couple and walked over to them, shouting in high-octane tongues and grabbing them by their shirts, blessing and giving them the psycho faith healer spiel. Always on his guard, the Reverend ducked with a second to spare from Earl's full-on haymaker as about to render him obsolete, grabbed me and ran off. My legs stayed numb and straight. I could feel my knees bending backwards while my feet scraped the pebbly concrete. I finally snapped out of it during the rustle of the train ride the rest of the way to the show. Well, look who's back to the world, the Reverend said, slouching in the hard seat of the L train, passing the bottle of potion over to me to complete the transition back to the world. Those neighbors of yours are a pretty couple of ungrateful sacks of crap. I zapped them out of their blindness and they couldn't even thank me when I commanded them to, just stood there like a couple of retarded donkeys. That's because they aren't blind, they're deaf, I said. Now how the hell can I fix two people that can't even decide what to be stricken with? Indecisiveness, that's the problem with this country today. Hey Donnie, watch this, he said, with the sly snicker of a man who pokes beehives for kicks. He shoved the bottle in my hands and walked over to some woman with Popeye forearms and furry knuckles, sat next to her, and said something that caused her to rise from her seat and exhibit the frame of some mutant grizzly bear. I shook my head, sipping the sauce and falling deep into a weird kind of heavy, as she grabbed the Reverend by the throat and throttled him. The good Reverend Barstool's trouble was compounded by his smug tongue lashing of brutal psalms as his throat was clasped under her heavy paws. As the train pulled into our stop, he managed to slither away as she loosened her hands, like a hitter readjusting his grip around the bat, and we ducked out the doors of her stop before she could get a wrangle on him again. When we finally made it to the venue, the bar was too full to get ourselves a drink without getting our elbows knotty over the weak bones of the bespectacled wanna-geeks that lined the joint from wall to wall. I trusted the Reverend to get the job done with as little hassle and blood as possible, so I tasked him with the drink fetching while I stole off to the John to empty the innards and pack the skull with some weird powders I was able to get my hands on. I had to keep that a secret from the good priest, who would have gone off on a revved-up frenzy that no creative mind could document in good conscience, without outright abusing God and stamping his ticket to fate's worst in hell, which doesn't sound like too bad a gig if you've got the guts to handle it. I came out of the bathroom and walked directly into the furious mess of monotonous chill wave coming from a band of wisps called Ranch House, the opening act, and a group of somethings that I could use to make a compelling case for postpartum abortion. I settled into my seat and watched from across the room as the Reverend got cozy with some smiling blonde, clearly zonked and letting her body fall into his, until he leaned and whispered something into her ear, causing her to thump him with a straight chin shot and the threat of a blast of mace. He backed off, hands in the air, and slunk back over to our table, his body looking defeated, but his eyes defiant. Man, oh man, brother, I said with a laugh, you're really winning the ladies tonight, aren't you? Bah, to hell with her, he said, gulping his bottle of beer in 3 long chugs. She's a no-good heathen anyway. Let the dogs of hell have at her. Her bones are hollow and couldn't handle my sermon anyway. I'm fire and brimstone, brother man, you know that. I don't know, I said. Things were looking good for a minute there. What'd you say to her? I told her I wanted to baptize her with the cream of life, he said. Time ceased to have any real meaning or movement, and when Aaron Barons and the Midnight Stroll finally wandered on stage, my excitement had tapered off. The Reverend and I were too paralyzed with booze and other perks to even care. We had gone through a total power transfer, with me feeling the wavy, pulsating peaks of serious ecstasy, while the Reverend went through some kind of degenerative spiritual mutation. He frothed, and he began to catch the notes of music that flowed behind the mystical purple and green lights. He dropped like a sack of bricks and began to crawl on the floor, writhing like a drunk cobra and howling, lifting the pant legs of dancing hipsters and taking deep bites of their ankles. I could only watch in silent horror, standing tight and rigid like a bushman about to paralyze some gump-brained antelope, before I uncoiled and fell into the corner fireplace, kicking and laughing uncontrollably while my back shredded and shins got lumpy against the bricks. The crowd, frozen in the fit of a fear they could never have envisioned when leaving for the show earlier in the night, jumped back when the Reverend shot up onto the stage like a hollow-tipped bullet and began his maniacal sermon. The crowd's tearful confusion, mixed with the lingering psychic effects of the Reverend's new language and the whiplash frenzy of the riot squad's charge into the hall to break up the static, gave the two of us the perfect opportunity to slip out undetected and untouched. The only blood we took was what stained our jeans and jackets, and no more. It was what we felt we were due as trophies of the night, hard-earned. The train ride back into the neighborhood was sedate. The car we were on was empty, and we smoked cigarettes openly on our way back to the Reverend's rectory. "Are we on for next week?" I asked as we rolled up to a stop. "Same bat time, same bat channel," he said, before disappearing into the cold black night.
What an excellent story, man. I'm wondering, is this Reverend, is he an actual man of the cloth?
Well, he certainly follows his own path of enlightenment, that is for sure.